Welcome to Tang's Productions. Today I'm talking about the Wing Chun Centreline Punch. The Centreline Punch is the most basic technique and yet the most advanced technique. And the reason is, we start off in the Wing Chun system, in a traditional system, learning the first strike, which is a Centreline Punch. Quite often, a lot of people start off and also remain training in a very one set way of training. To advance the Centreline Punch is to allow it flexibility and to apply it according to different variables. By that I mean, if a Centreline Punch is defined as starting point from here, some people would say here, some people say here. So the rationale is got to be logic. It's no right or wrong. Any technique is highly dependent on reaction time and response time. That will determine how that technique, the form, the shape, or the structure, how effective it is and how it can be applied. To define or try to attempt to say what's the right technique and what's the right shape, or this word structure, which I think is very poorly used and a lot of times very confusing, like the word chi. Sometimes it's very poorly used. In fact, not sometimes, a lot of times. When it comes to Centreline Punch or any technique, from a physical point of view, you need to know where the start position is and where the destination is, and what is the intention. Until you have those set parameters determined, it's very difficult to say what is the right way to deliver it and what's the right technique. And a lot of people will argue over, oh, I follow this lineage or that, I listen to that instructor, he said this, or this champion says that. It really doesn't matter. What matters is those things. Where the start position, where's the end position, and what's your intention. For example, if my start position is here, if I'm held here, as in a sporting combat, if your hands is already up, and the end position's here, for a Centreline Punch, then it would be a straight from here to here. The intention is to cause impact with a maximum effect. However, if my hand is down by the hips and the destination is here, then the trajectory, the pathway of the Centreline Punch changes. It's no longer a horizontal line. It's an upward and a forward motion. So therefore the trajectory has changed. However, do you still call that Centreline Punch or not? Now you can argue for the safer argument, or do you can accept that is a centerline punch, but applied under different circumstances. The next thing is to look at the delivery. How should you deliver it? Should you coil up, tense, and then release? Or do you use minimal tension at the beginning and then just flick it out? Or do you hold it very rigid and rely on the trunk to throw that punch? There's no right or wrong answer. It varies depending on your opponent, and it varies depending how you wish to deliver it. For speed, you ought to use hand motion, less recruitment of the larger muscles like the legs and the trunk, your core muscles, but mostly from the arm. For example, anterior delts, releasing with the triceps and then tension at the end for a short period of time. That's a very quick motion and recovery rate's quicker. If you're going the opposite, when you try to recruit power punch, you then rely on the reaction force of the ground, planting the legs, good stance, and as you push up, you rotate the trunk and then you release. So there's a push off from ground, legs to hips to shoulders and then release. And that's a different way of producing the power. So when it comes to training, you ought to train several different delivery and according to different distances and different angles. So one single technique like the centerline punch you should be able to apply it under different circumstances and with different intentions and different delivery. That way your centerline punch is most likely to be more practical and easier to adapt to a real situation. So the next stage is about impact force. Forget all about those aspects I spoke about earlier. Impact force, here's a pad, for example. Let's say you hit it. A lot of people say, yeah, you have to punch through the bag, etc. For a beginner, is not a great thing. And the reason is you lose form, you lose coordination, you rely on total muscle strength, and you try to hit the bag as hard as you can to go through it and beyond it. It becomes what I call an overloaded technique. An example would be if you're doing weights, if you're doing a bicep curl, for example. If you're doing a lightweight, you can coordinate the movement quite well. If you use it extremely heavyweight, you end up lifting your trunk and then try to lift it like that, and you're not really keeping a good form, good shape, or good structure. Breathing is out, focus is all over the place. Same thing with striking a pad. Imagine there's a surface, you hit it, you go bang, and you focus on sharp technique. Then you think about going deeper. You're going 1 inch behind the bag, bang, bang, but your technique's still smooth, you can recover it well, you can transfer the force well. Then when you're used to that, then you can combine the movement and you can recover. Once you feel you've got that rhythm and that natural flow, then you go a bit deeper and a bit deeper. That's a good, effective, efficient strike. Let's say thin air. You can keep punching, keep going non-stop, and it looks fast. But if you start hitting an object, that will definitely slow down. The harder the impact force is, the slower those repetitive punches will be. Look at people break chunks of wood, ice, etc. Extremely powerful. But when it comes to a moving target, it's a very different way of using power, and you have to produce that very quickly. When you watch someone who do power punch, so breaking concrete blocks, blocks of wood, anything massive, it takes about 10 seconds for them to break it. You need to count them from by the time they start thinking, mentally judge a distance, to breathe, to 1, 2, focus, and then break it. That's about 10 seconds. In a combative situation or in a competitive situation, you're not afforded that sort of time. However, it doesn't mean it's not good, because if you pin someone down, hold it firm, and the target is steady at one position for a long time, and then you lay the punch in, those force would become quite important. It's a different way of using your power when the target's moving and when the target can strike you back at the same time. Continuing with the Centreline Punch, delivering it and recovering it. Also, delivering it when you recover. When you deliver, you're always expose yourself to danger, because you're open. Every time you reach out, you're not covering your head. Somebody can strike you back. And when you're not used to taking impact, as soon as somebody hits you on the face, like this, and if you're not used to it, you panic, you freeze, and your technique, you lose that form, you lose that technique, you lose the coordination. And a good way of training that is through sparring. And again, with sparring, a lot of beginners, even amateur fighters, were way over competitive, try to do too much, and then you pick up very bad habits. So you pick up very poor coordination. Same again, if you're doing impact training, if you're taking impact, you've got to do it slowly, lightly, gently, and you've got to be able to keep a clear vision and to control your breathing and control the flow of the technique. So that's the most important thing when you're doing that. If you're starting off sparring, don't try to spar too hard. You end up hurting each other, and then you're getting put off by it, and your technique is poor. So the only way to test it is when you have a real life situation. By that time, you're taking a lot more risk. Right, here's the end of the program, and obviously there's a lot to talk about. I'm trying to just cover a few basic things on top of my head, how one can help themselves, whether you're a beginner or a competitive fighter, because the basic technique is always your most advanced technique. You can never be good enough